Before we start the ranking, I would just like to say thank you so much for getting me to 400 subscribers. I know my channel is just a small one, and content sometimes takes a little bit of a while to come out, but I am really grateful. It is nice to see. Hopefully I can continue making new content, and whether or not you're here for just the Thomas content, or whatever else I do, thank you for tuning in and leaving the feedback. It really means a lot. Well, good people, here we are, Series 5. To me, this is where Classic Thomas ends. I know some consider Series 7 to be the finale of the classics before Hit Entertainment took over, but Series 5 was where I stopped watching as a child, and honestly, based on the snippets I've seen of what comes afterwards, Magic Railroad really tanked the franchise and it never quite recovered in my eyes. Series 5 is considered a fan favourite, and it's easy to see why, but there are aspects of it that you just have to accept. None of the episodes here were based on Audrey's work. Every single episode is original. This is a much more bombastic and cinematic series than what came before, with episodes involving runaway boulders, cranes falling over, avalanches and ghosts. I can imagine people who love the first two series for Audrey's more grounded stories being put off by Series 5, which is perfectly fine to be honest. Series 5 definitely sticks out like a sore thumb amongst the classics, but hey, I enjoy it, and so do many others, so it's fine. That's enough preamble. Time for the ranking. As much as I love Series 5, it does have some episodes that aren't terribly exciting, and the bottom half of this ranking will probably reflect that. This episode is one of them. There's all this talk about Gremlins and their running theme throughout. Gordon has to transport a VIP and goes a bit too fast, ruining her journey mid-bath. When he arrives, her dog runs all over the station and ends up causing such a fuss that the VIP, who's revealed to be Topham's dear old mum, renames him Gremlin. That's funny, I guess? I do like the way Michelangelo says, "Off. Not gonna lie, this episode gives me Series 3 flashbacks. A much more laid-back Thomas story without anything too eventful going on. Due to a misunderstanding, the engines get beef with Harold and think he's stealing their job. There's a B-plot of Thomas wanting to help some kids save their playground, which only really comes in at the start and at the end, and by the time the episode's over, they all know that Harold is just helping out. I mean, I like this more than Gordon and the Gremlin because of the crash, but I still don't like it very much. The Fat Controller goes on holiday. That's it really. He has his holiday disrupted by an annoying plane called Tiger Moth, and he chews the pilot out, who doesn't seem all too bothered by it really.
Yes, sir!
And then he goes down a canal on a barge. The canal set is really nice and I love all the water and mud. And the ending when he finishes his barge journey on top of the breakdown train is pretty funny. It's a nice little episode with Mrs. Kindly's daughter getting married, and Percy has to help with the good luck package. Old Slowcoat makes another appearance, which is always pleasant. And we get a bit of hot human on engine action at the end. Oh look, James is being pompous again. Woohoo! I do find something hilarious about the fact that upon finding out that Mrs. Kindly is sad since she can't see her sister, the Fat Controller takes the time to dispatch Harold to pick her up. I mean, would he do that if I was sad? Would he do that if you were sad? James takes Mrs. Kindly on a trip to a fairground at the castle, which is the same one that Toby found back in Toby's Discovery, so there's a nice little bit of continuity there. The scene with the three engines discussing their favourite station gets me every time, because of Percy's absolute zinger that he drops.
That's why I like it, especially when you're there and not here saying I'm silly. Good night.
The rest of the episode is alright. There's an incident with some boys in a ram causing trouble in the station, and I think they really missed an opportunity to have Michelangelo make a bar noise. I mean, these narrators have made funny engine sounds before, remember. History repeats itself with the Fat Controller's hat getting eaten, with a nice callback to Series 1. Next to diesels, road vehicles were the biggest threat to steam engines, and this episode reinforces that, with the lorries being brought in to do the work. I do have to wonder why the Fat Controller signed off on that though. I mean, did he just want to make the engines work easier, or... It's good seeing the lorries have accidents after talking all that smack to the engines, and I like the whole message of different vehicles being suited for different parts of the island. I kind of wish that they just learned to work together to reinforce that though, rather than just having the lorries break down, which restores the status quo. This episode has awesome visuals, with a stormy background and really grimy courtyards that remind me of Series 2. James is being horrible to everyone and boasts about being able to shove trees aside, but soon eats his words when he has to retreat from a falling one, with these nightmarish close-ups. It's nice how serious Thomas takes it, knowing that this isn't the time for mucking about. He's really grown up, hasn't he? Time for not only a Bill and Ben episode, but a Diesel episode. Though he isn't named here, we found out from outside material that his name is Derek. He seems pleasant enough, with a jovial little theme, but unfortunately does suffer from issues. The way the small engines interpret teething troubles as toothache is amusing, and it's good how they work together at the end. One thing that really strikes me about this episode is just the offhanded way the yard manager talks about scrapping old Slow Coach.
Old Slow Coach? She's been here for years. She'll be broken up when we find the time, he replied.
We already know that things get scrapped on the island all the time, but there's just something really cold about this. He's just like, yeah, she's gonna die soon. Ah well, moving on. It's a bit of a stark reminder that although we see these as characters, at the end of the day these are still just machines that plenty of people on the island probably just see as tools to be used, and not characters with feelings. Anyway, the rest of the episode is pretty good, with a real sense of helplessness, as nobody really knows how to help Slow Coach. The scene with the burning hut are some good looking smoked effects, and it's nice to see old Slow Coach get fixed up at the end for use to house the stranded workmen. It does make you wonder though, if they were ready to scrap her despite her good condition, how long is she going to last in her new spot? Percy is getting sick of his work with the trucks, and just wishes something exciting would happen. If you've seen Heroes, then you'd know this never ends well. The runaway trucks cause quite a stir when they break away from Percy. It's a bit like a close shave, but in reverse. Minus the crash. The runaway theme is always welcome to be heard, making the scene a bit more intense, but overall it's not that exciting. The Fat Controller is an important figure on this railway, so it's cool to finally have an episode where he's the main character. The dude just loves his wife, and he goes through the absolute ringer to make it to a birthday party. It's just a series of unfortunate events that culminate in this hilarious scene where the Fat Controller falls straight into a bog.
Bother!
Just brilliant. There's a bit of road vehicle coal flinging too, with George putting Caroline down, showing that his mean streak isn't just limited to engines. Haha, the name of this episode is a pun. He's up to his old tricks again, giving Renee and Scullowy grief. It's a shame he doesn't have any interactions with Duncan, because I think they'd be hilarious together, to be honest. It's almost heartwarming to see him in his element, actually enjoying himself, paving over an old derelict branch line. Whose branch line was this? Is it one we've seen before? Who knows? He does an obscenely bad job, and ends up causing Thomas to crash into a van. And not only that, makes Gordon crash too. Can trucks fly like that? Who knows? Toby takes the Fat Controller and his family on an excursion across the island, where they find an old castle and an old mine. When watching this episode I noticed something familiar, and it's the place names on this map. It's actually a map of North Wales. The names and places line up with some alterations here and there. Pretty cool, right? It's nice seeing more parts of the island explored, as newer old things are discovered. It's something Series 5 does well, though it is unfortunate that most of these are just one appearance only places that are never seen again. I love how the family doesn't even bother exploring the castle. They just turn up and look at it, go, yep, that's a good castle, and then immediately leave. We do see it again and make someone happy though. The mine is where most of the episode takes place, and we learn that it was once run by the narrow gauge engines long ago. But now it's abandoned with scrapped engines laying about. How pleasant. As the regeneration takes place, Toby gets spooked by the legends of the old warrior, and the mine is really eerie at night. But of course, we find out that it's only Bertram, who's apparently very brave. How do we know he's brave? Well, they tell us, of course.
We call him the old warrior because he's so brave.
Wish we could have seen more of Bertram, even if he is just Duke with Smudge's face. He doesn't even get any lines. Every series has a snow episode, and here is Series 5's. The snow sets look lovely, and the sight of Percy covered in the snowdrift looks really comical. Most of the episode is told as a flashback by Rusty, telling the story of an incident on the Scarlowy Railway. The way Michelangelis does the truck's voice here sounds downright demonic.
Break it! Snap it! Shouted the trucks.
The avalanche scene is really climactic, as Scarlowy gets buried, and I'm not quite sure if it's accurate for an engine to get encased in ice like that, but it is still a funny sight. This is the first episode of Series 5, and what an introduction it is. Cranky is a really fun new character, and I love how he both literally and figuratively looks down on the engines. The nighttime scene with the engines huddled in the shed during a storm is just spectacular. I love all the weather effects. The old tram steamer splashing into the docks and causing a collapse is really well filmed, and a sign of things to come. This isn't your Daddy Thomas and Friends anymore. The crash in this episode is really fun and memorable. Gordon is mouthing off about how great he is and just wants to show off what he can do. But the station he stops at has a really boring view, which just makes him even more cross. After going to the works and getting mended, you think he'd be free of problems, but something inside him gets jammed, and he careens ahead at full speed, crashing straight through the station wall to hang dangerously over the other side. His wrecked model looks really cool, with his buffers all askew and his wheels hanging off there. Not only that, but the humans are injured too, which is something we rarely see in the series. Oliver and Toad are a great pairing, since they're partners at all, and as was the case with Stepney, Oliver just wants a nice long run. He gets his wish granted one night when he gets to work the mail train, allowing him to go on a long journey. Due to a sleeping signalman, he gets sent down an old abandoned line, leading him to crashing into a long forgotten shed. As someone who enjoys urban exploration and finding old things, I did really like the rundown old building sets, and the Fat Controller having knows about, because that's exactly what I'd be doing too. It's time for Toad to have a spotlight episode. This one is really fun. Toad is jealous of seeing everyone else happily moving forwards, since he only ever experiences journeys from backwards perspective. This makes the other trucks annoyed, since they think he should be grateful for all the work he already does, and decide to teach him a lesson. They break away from Oliver and roll away at top speed, with Toad at the front, finally fulfilling his desire of travelling forwards in this fun chase scene. William Tell's overture is mixed in wonderfully with the runaway theme, and the different engines' reaction to Toad thundering past are amusing, especially James's.
What was that? Exclaimed James.
He goes from being confused to enjoying himself, then being scared, as he realises there's most likely an accident imminent, which thankfully proves to be non-fatal when he plunges straight into a muddy pond, bubbling about, like his namesake. We already know that Thomas doesn't like fish, which makes the opening scene when a crate of them gets dropped on him even funnier. It's established early on that the track would be dangerous for a heavy engine to travel on, which of course clues you in on what's going to be happening later on. Nice foreshadowing. I always like seeing the harbour sets at night, which I've already spoken at length about. The ominous music as Henry pulls the flying kipper along the coastal route really helps to build the tension, and it picks up when the guard starts freaking out over the dangerous tracks they know Henry is going to be travelling down. The lights illuminating the mist as Henry travels looks really atmospheric, and the sequence when he plunges into the water looks awesome. Cranky gets a chance to talk some smack at the end, great to see him again. Fun fact, the fish used in the episode are real sardines. Ugh. As someone with a childhood-rooted fear of dead fish, this makes her a bit more hard to watch. This episode traumatised me as a child. Whenever Boulder was on screen with that face, I just... ugh. The somber music really fits Boulder as this mysterious rocky sentinel that sits high above the mountains looking down on everyone. And is it just me, or does this little music ditty that plays on the face reveal sound like the PS1 startup sound? The chase scene is just non-stop chaos, with crashes and engines running for their lives, and it's here we get the ever-famous
Yikes!
from Michelangelis. It culminates in Boulder just narrowly missing Percy and colliding with the shed, which then of course explodes. Just epic stuff. The lack of music throughout the chase is really noticeable. It really sells this as a serious incident. It's the ending of the episode that really gets you thinking though.
We should have left this part of the island alone, he said thoughtfully.
What did he mean by this? Does he know something that we don't? Are there old legends about the boulder that should have been heeded? Who knows? A very good episode. Oh, and Thumpo was there too. This is the first of Series 5's scary episodes, and I hear it really scared fans as kids. While personally I never found it that scary. That belongs to another episode this series. Haunted Henry is still an incredibly spooky and well-constructed episode. The line that Henry travels down just looks really desolate and unwelcoming at night, and when the mist rolls in and smothers the whole place, it just adds an extra layer of unease. I especially love the camera angles that show how far the mist comes up around Henry, showing just how submerged he is. God, that truck's face is unsettling. All the stuff with the old station and the mysterious figure watching Henry is eerie, but of course we find out in the end that it's just Old Bailey. The crash is really good too. I wish we got to see more of Old Bailey in a station afterwards, but you know, that's season 5 for you. I feel like out of every member of the cast, Percy has probably gone through the most. He's had a runaway after nearly being hit by Gordon, crashed into a brake van, he's been submerged in water twice, had to save Toby from going over a waterfall, and now he's just narrowly avoiding being buried alive by a mine collapse. The little engine has really been through a lot, hasn't he? I love the gritty look of this episode. Everything just seems so dirty and worn. I really like the camera work throughout, especially as the trucks travel through the mine shaft. It's very rare we actually get to see things moving through interiors other than stations in this show. The close-up shot of Percy frantically trying to escape is really frightening, and he only just barely escapes getting buried, thanks to some quick thinking and a canvas barrier. Hey, Stepney's back. Yay! I'm glad him and Rusty still work together. He's still in need of a different working environment for a change, so he gets sent to the quarry, with a warning not to get lost on his way home because it's unfamiliar to him. That pleasantry is soon lost though, as Stepney is sent on a night special. The journey home takes him down the same route Henry took in Haunted Henry, and eventually this leads him to a grimy, hellish environment full of rusty parts and hanging chains. As the fog clears, we have a sickening realization that it's the last place any engine would want to go, the scrapyard. His crew go for help, leaving Stepney stranded and alone in this nightmare zone. But it isn't long until he's joined by a pair of diesels emerging from the depths. Their dialogue implies that this isn't the first time they've met Stepney, which gets you thinking, were they the ones who were going to get him scrapped back before Rusty rescued him? Did they feel cheated out of their job and have spent their time waiting for this moment? Are the drivers in on this too? Yeah, Diesel was nasty back in Series 2, but he never outright tried to murder anyone. Ari and Bert tried to get Stepney dunked into a smelter with a giant grabber, Bloody hell, man. This whole sequence is tense as hell. Proper nail-biting stuff. Thankfully, the Pack Controller was there to save the day at the end. A very intense episode, and one of the best. Music and set design mesh together wonderfully here. The downpouring rain and lashing river really set the mood, along with the really atmospheric music that was used really well both here and in Rusty and the Boulder. This isn't the first time Toby's narrowly avoided an accident in water, if you cast your mind back to Toby's tightrope in Series 3. Little old Toby has to be brave and spring into action when the dam collapses in this climactic moment that's like something out of Thunderbirds. There's a real sense of danger here, because if Toby goes over that waterfall, then both he and his driver are absolutely buggered. It's Percy and Harold who end up saving him, the two friendly rivals coming together to save the little tram. Really good use of effects, music, and atmosphere, and storytelling here. I've already made a video on why this is my favourite episode of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, so if you want to see me go even more in depth, then I'd recommend you go watch that, because what I say here is more or less just going to echo that. I consider this to be my favourite episode because of the way it mixes together my favourite aspects of the show, in a way that hasn't quite been done before. I'm a big fan of ghost stories, so naturally, that gives the episode a bit of a boost in my eyes. The characters are used really well, with Duncan being his usual mean self and getting his comeuppance, Rusty being the voice of reason and stepping in, and Peter Sam having an accident. The story of the little engine being lost on its way home is really upsetting, and is actually the first on-screen death of a character. We don't really know the character itself, but, you know, it's still there. The narration throughout is very effective, with Michael Angelis giving a really subdued performance that's appropriate for the ominous and tragic tone of the episode. The music is haunting, a really sad-sounding piece by Mike and Jr., playing through the tale and Duncan's ghostly encounter, that makes the story of the lost engine hit even harder. The set design is on point, with the mist rising up from the murky swamps to envelop the iron bridge being a standout of the whole series in my opinion. The mystery of the ghost engine is really well used. We honestly have no idea if the tale is true, or just something Rusty made up to spook Duncan. And even if it is true, who's to say how much of it is real? There could be an engine that drowned in the swamp and is still down there to this day, abandoned. Even without the ghost part, that's still really eerie. Imagine all the episodes that travel over the bridge every day, blissfully unaware of the remains that lay submerged below. The encounter with the ghost is explained to us as fireflies, but who knows, maybe it's real. The fireflies do look like Rheneas, and the actual ghost in the flashback was based on Scarlowy's model, so, you know. The ambiguity of the ghost really helps the episode feel grounded too, since the paranormal aspect is never explicitly confirmed, and you can just imagine this as an engine having a perfectly normal day, but get spooked a bit by a few occurrences that all have explanation. If you believe in ghosts and just want them on Sodor, then this episode delivers. And if you don't, then hey, it's just a story. And so ends the ranking for Series 5. And with that, my ranking of the classic series. After Series 5, of course, came the Magic Railroad, with Series 6 and 7 following. And I know some consider those parts of the classic series too, but I personally don't. If you disagree, that's fine. I hope you've enjoyed these videos and continue to stick around for more, because I will be doing them. More Thomas content, maybe some more game stuff, anime stuff, who knows. There will be more though. Thank you for watching and have a great day.